I'll call the February meeting of the Finance Committee to order. The first order of business is certification of compliance with open meetings law. Did we do that?
Public notice was sent.
Good. And next item is ask the clerk to call the roll.
Bruce Paulson.
Here.
Don Pettit.
Here.
Ron Kingsley.
Here.
Tom Duffy.
Here. Okay. Meeting agenda is presented. Anybody want to change anything around on the agenda? If not, okay. Next item of business is the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Mike, do you want to walk us through this resolution? We see these kinds of resolutions every year about this time.
Yeah. Did we?
Oh, I'm sorry. Public comments. I missed public comments.
There's a hand up, Linda Zilmer.
Okay. That's it.
Good morning.
Morning.
My public comment this morning has to do with something that I had raised when the city of Hayward had created previous TIF districts. My concern is that although you have appointed the county administrator to be the representative on the joint board approving TIF districts, I feel that it's not the discretion of the administrator whether or not to vote for or against a TIF district. But I think that should be something voted on by committee and the full county board. And the reason I believe that is that with each TIF district that gets created, and City of Hayward is now creating TIF District 6, that prevents the tax revenues from development coming to all the other taxing entities for the life of that taxing district. So as you look at the number of open TIF districts now in any development, that is, especially in tight revenue times, preventing the county from, and all the other taxing entities like the school district, from getting tax revenues from those properties. So when I had mentioned this before, I had also asked that the county create a TIF policy to guide decisions on whether to support or to not support creation of future TIF districts. So I would request that that please be put on a future agenda. Thank you.
Okay, is that it? Any more public comments, Mike?
No.
All right. Then the next item of business, approval of the January minutes. Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Duffy moved, seconded by Ms. Pettit. Any discussion? All in favor, aye. Opposed,
Aye.
nay? Motion carried. Now, Mike, I'm sorry.
Okay, so in the packet is a resolution to the Sheriff's Department to recognize donations they received during the 2020 year and to carry over the unspent donations, which is the 10,870, over to the 2021 budget.
And you're recommending this to happen?
Yes.
Okay. Here's a motion to do. Motion by Mr. Kingsley, seconded by Mr. Duffy. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Okay, the tentative finance committee calendar. We saw this last month, but I just wanted to bring it back and to point out in March of this year, we're going to be updating our 5-year financial plan. And I think you recall last year, for the first time in my memory, this county had produced a 5-year financial plan. That's put us in the ranks. So I guess the ranks of some very well-run counties, and we're going to review that a little later. I just wanted to mention that we are going to be reviewing the 5-year plan in March. Okay. All right. Mike, do you want to talk about the preliminary budget results?
Yes. All right, first I just want to stress These are still preliminary. We're still going through budgets. Most of my attention right now is looking at grants, tying out the grants, recognizing receivables that need to be recognized. So we're still in that process. These numbers are going to change, but preliminarily, I've listed every fund the county has. I show the revenue for the fund, the expense for the fund, and you see if there's an excess or deficit remaining per fund. I'll go through some of these just quickly. The general fund, right now we're sitting at about $1.3 million excess. And we'll look at the detail on the general fund in a minute to see what generated some of that excess. But very, very happy with how the general fund has turned out. A little bit surprising considering the whole coronavirus last year, addressing that. But anyway, the general fund is looking strong for last year. The next several funds are just small special revenue funds. They're pretty much set. 200 is pretty much set. 201 is set. 205, 206 is set. Land records, Fund 210, I've gone through that with Dan. I've gone through Fund 212 with Dan, that's set. Fund 213 is set. 217 is set. 218 is set. 223 is set. Fund 225, Human Services. This is probably the fund for last year that's probably most concerning right now. This is showing a deficit of about 750,000. The deficit right now is up over 800,000. Primarily, the deficit is created due to the people that get sent to the Winnebago Mendota facilities.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question. Thanks for bringing that up, Nate. You know, I sit on Health and Human Services, and we had a meeting just this past Tuesday night, and we actually had a lengthy discussion on how the county placements and that, what I call runaway training with their finances there. So I was gonna bring up at the end of this meeting that be a future agenda item for this committee. Because we have the people in Health and Human Services looking at that, and I appreciate it, but there's really no resolution coming out. We need this brain trust right here to look at that and see how we're gonna budget for it, what we're gonna do in the future. So that's, I think it was $1 million last year, right? We're gonna take it.
And just, I know Tom wants to jump. I just want to say
that.
So this number here reflects 10 months worth of expenditures for the Winnebago stuff. We've now gotten November's in, that's why I say it's up over 800,000. We still haven't recognized December's expense yet. So it's just gonna go higher. Now we are anticipating some revenues to come in. I'm not sure how much yet, but it is a concern because this appears to be an ongoing trend. It doesn't seem to be an anomaly right now.
Right. Yeah, and we talked extensively about this during the budget proceedings last year, and you know, looking at the fund balance in the Health and Human Services Department over the last 6 years. They've been able to beat the budget even with the additional cost overages in this out county placement area. So the fund balance has gradually risen up to over $1 million in that fund as we went into budget season last year. So we did have a lot of discussion about how do we handle the budget for that area, and we knew that we would take a hit to that fund balance, and we had planned on taking a hit to that fund balance. But the hit is larger than we had planned, which then creates the problem, not only for budget next year, but it creates what are we going to do in 2041? Are we in 21? Yes, we are. Yeah. And it's not just a problem that we can solve by looking at that program, because that program is mandated and those people need to be in these facilities to get the help that they need. And unfortunately, we have a couple of long-time members in those facilities that drive costs up, and then we've got others that go in and out of those facilities.
So that's really a high cost, but we need to find a solution for our budget purposes. I mean, it's a countywide problem. It's not just a problem that Health and Human Services can solve by themselves. It's going to take, you know, if we can't endure another $1 million every year and absorb it, then we need to find other ways to save $1 million a year. And that's the problem that keeps Mike up at night, thinking about, because that problem isn't going away. And Health and Human Services obviously is looking at, you know, all of the services that they provide and why these people, you know, need the help that they get and what can we do about that. You know, all those things are longer term, you know, things that change behaviors or society. But in the meantime, you know, we've got $1 million problem each and every year. So, yeah, so the good news on the general fund is wiped out by the bad news in the Health and Human Services fund.
What are other counties doing? They must all have the same problem.
And we talk about it amongst other counties. You know, another northern county, you know, has had about $650,000 overage. Chippewa County had over $1 million. You know, as we look around the state, this is, you know, the mental health issues are, you know, the highest priority or virtually the highest priority everywhere. But it's, you know, it's the way the state has, you know, financed their operations and put the burden on the county. You know, not just in this area. I mean, there's other areas too that we get to squeeze when the state balances their budget. And you know, with our levy limits the way they are and the services that we're mandated to provide, we talk about it every year. We get squeezed, and we've been able to kind of stick handle our way through it each and every year. But we're running out of options to be creative on getting through the budget year. So that's why we're concerned. And yeah, we do need to have further discussions about, you know, what we're going to do about specifically that situation. But you know, on our overall budget as well.
Like you got
Miss Pettit
okay.
has her hand up.
Ms. Pettit, do you have something to say?
Yes, sir. Good morning, gentlemen. I and Mr. Hoff already have stated that there was a lengthy discussion at HHS regarding this. It is a nationwide problem, not only in the rural communities throughout, but mostly in the rural communities, because we do not have the budget to sustain those individuals that are needing those needs for mental health. And because of the pandemic and the opium epidemic, it has become an even greater problem, which it will continue to be a problem. I would ask that Mr. Bissonnette, I had asked Mr. Schumann and Ms. Gouget, if there is a Native American that is in those facilities, what is the tribe's contribution through their health insurance to take some of the burden off of the county? Because it cannot be solely the county paying for everything if these individuals are in there. And it's just so we can balance things out. I would suspect that the health insurance from the LCO tribe would cover some of this. So that's where I'm looking at. And I'm also looking at, as I have said, I will never, this has been since I've been on about HHS and taking funds away from this department. There is absolutely, and for that need, the programs are cut to bare minimum. We have to care for those individuals. We have no choice about it. We can't just say we don't have the money. And we discussed this in HHS that I know everybody's going and lobbying, but we've been lobbying from what I'm hearing for 10 plus years and nothing's happened. So do we either, I know no one wants to go to the media, no one wants to say anything, but maybe is this the chairman and the county administrator sit down and speak to somebody from the medium and explain the circumstances we are in. So if we do have to go for a referendum, or maybe it will open the eyes up at the Capitol, because this has to be solved. They can't just keep saying, we're going to help, we're going to help, we're going to help, and nothing happens. That's all I got.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Kemp.
A while back, there was conversations whether the towns up here in the north were going to put together their own clinic to house some of that stuff. Is there anything ever developed out of that?
Nothing official. There was some talk about, not Mendota or Winnebago, the children's facility. Having regional centers for that, but there weren't any counties that wanted to foot the bill. The state would pay for construction, but then it was up to the counties to run it, and everyone's gun shy about trusting the state to help them out and things like that. So there hasn't been any discussion about a regional facility for adult daycare or adult mental health services that I'm aware of.
Well, I'll continue through this.
Go ahead.
All right. Funds 229, and I'm looking at the middle column that says actual.
Sure.
Fund 229 is set, tribal law enforcement is set, canteen is set. That deficit is due to the heating and cooling project that they're working on, which I think is mostly complete now.
But they've got a fund balance.
Yeah, the fund balance is covering that. There's also going to be another project, the boiler project,
Right.
this year,
Okay.
which is will be covered by fund balance. The county parks 237 is set. Fund 240 resource development, I have not gone through that yet. There's deficit there, but that's fund balance covered also. 242 I have not reviewed yet. 245 is set. Fund 246 land conservation, I have not gotten through yet, but that deficit should go away because there's staffing grants we're waiting on. Wildlife damage, we're waiting on revenues there. That deficit should go away.
Will it cover all the deficit then?
Yes. I believe wildlife damage will be fully covered. The ATV, Fund 249, that deficit will go away. We're going through those different grants now. We'll be setting up receivables, so that should be a zero. Fund 250 is 5 is set, 256 is set, 257 is set. I believe 258 is set. 300 debt service is set. Then the 400s I'm going through right now. I'll be probably moving some money around between the 400s to eliminate some of the deficits. You'll notice in Fund 400, there's a revenue of $993,000. That's the borrowing we did for the, we borrowed it in 2020,
Right.
late December, but it's for the 21 budget items. So the 400s, that's the 400s, those are the capitals. Fund 701 is highway. I'm not sure where they're at in their reconciling process. I'm sure they still need to record depreciation expense. They usually do that very last. And that's usually a $450,000 expenditure to their budget. Fund 702 is set. Fund 812, Winter Depot. The project is complete. We are showing a deficit right now. I turned over to the DOT rep in Spooner to complete the paperwork to close this out so we could draw down the final remaining funds. He says he's in the process of doing that. I keep asking him for updates and he just says, yep, I'm working on it. So
How long has it been working?
I had my first contact with him in November. And just last week or two sent another one. He said, yep, I'm working on it. 815 and 855, those are set. So still some work to do on your end, but we're getting closer. And then the next 2 pages are a little bit of detail on the general fund. I give you expenditures by department and revenues by department. Just kind of, what generated the excess that the general fund is showing.
This is through December.
This is all, yes, through December last year.
Perfect. Okay.
Again, these are gonna change a little bit. I'm aware of, for example, in emergency management, there's probably $40,000 in revenues we're still waiting to receive from the state. There's probably $15,000 in victim witness we're still waiting to receive. There's just some grant monies we're still waiting to receive. So on the expenditure side, if you look at, so the third column is amended budget. I look at that compared to the column that says year-to-date transactions. The next column is a variance column. And in the case of expenditures, the variance is positive. That's a favorable outcome.
Right.
Brackets are bad on the expenditures. So, for example, if you looked at the county clerk's budget last year, you see a $63,000 unfavorable outcome for the expenditure. So that's due to large election expenses last year. But when we look at the revenue side, you'll also see a large favorable outcome that offsets most of this.
Right. So have you allocated any of the COVID money we got for 300,000 or whatever?
We have not allocated it.
Where does it sit then?
On the revenue page, the COVID money is sitting in Department 00 right now.
General. Okay.
And it was 380,000 or something like that. We got the initial allocation.
Right.
Then we asked the townships for their excess. And
Right.
we got funds there. And then the state reallocated unspent money statewide.
Right.
We got another 30,000 there.
Okay.
But that money is sitting in the 00. So in the 00 department on the revenue side, sales tax, we received about an additional 225,000 over budget. The CARES money was 378,000. Stumpage was about 171,000 in excess of what we budgeted. Profit on tax deed sales was 160,000 over. But then interest on investments, we were under budget by 117,000. Registered deeds was 129,000 over budget on the revenue side.
Right.
In the sheriff's budget, under, for housing inmates in the jail over there, they get revenues.
Right.
But because of the COVID situation, they held inmates longer than they would have, otherwise they would have shipped them out. Well, we got another 80,000 from the state just for holding them longer than we needed to. So, just lots of reasons. It's not any one item why we have the excess.
Right. So you're going to keep the COVID money just in one lump in general so that we can.
I think so. We're still.
We had some discussion on that, and I think that's where we concluded.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise, when you do your comparison, you've got all those allocations. You got to say, oh, but.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you look at, let's go back to the expenditure page for the general fund. So I'm looking at the total now for the amended budget. The budget was set up for $14,750,000 in expenditures. Come over to the year-to-date column. Actual expenditures at this point is $14,150,000. So we've underspent the budget by $600,000. And then you can also compare that with the last column, which is what we spent a year ago. We spent $14,300,000. So we've actually spent less than we did in 2019 for a lot of reasons. And you can look at the totals on the revenue side. Budget-wise, we said we were going to collect $14,750,000, but collections actually came in at $15,000,005.
Right.
Just a good year for the general.
And these numbers are changing or will change? Or are you
Yes.
80% sure we're pretty much on target?
Well, I would say we're 80% on target right now. There might still be a few bills to come in, but nothing large that I'm anticipating.
Okay.
Like I said, I know there's some revenues yet to come
Grant money, okay.
Yeah.
All right, any questions on the preliminary general fund summary? Okay. We can move on to. Okay. You want to talk about this one next, and like?
Well, I don't know, Tom, do you want to start this off, or do you want to start with that, or? how do you-
Yeah, let me just kind of run through the introduction on where we're at with the whole project. This courtroom addition project we've been talking about for several years now, starting back in 2017 when the county board adopted the resolution for support of Second Circuit Court. And since that time, we've been planning towards that goal and hiring an architect to look at the design for what that court space could and should look like. Luckily, not luckily, but through good fortune, we were able to work with the city on vacating 5th Street and extending California Avenue, which allows us to build a facility between the current courthouse and the jail, which has all kinds of significant advantages for security in transporting prisoners, keeping staff safe, the liability of traffic back and forth over the street, transporting prisoners. So there's a lot of good things that come out of being able to build over 5th Street. And so since that time, we've been working again, after a little bit of a layoff there, to work with the plan as it sits over 5th Street. So we've had several discussions with all of the major players, the departments, sheriff, the judge, clerk courts, DA, IT, maintenance, the full gamut of participants in the users of that court space to make sure that we design it as efficiently and its ultimate workflow that we can accommodate within that space. As you recall, we had several options prior to the 5th Street option, trying to accommodate that courtroom as extensions to this building, whether it's on this side and that side of the building or within the building, and never really found a great solution until we came across the 5th Street option. But when we were dealing with those other options, we had a design of a courthouse and working with the circuit court administrator for our area and what that design looked like. So we had a pretty good idea of what that new courtroom would look like. When we got to the 5th Street option, we kind of plunked that design into that 5th Street location, and that's where we were. So in our discussions the past day, and we spent all day yesterday discussing this with people, we got a lot of great ideas on tweaking that design since it's located now where it is to accommodate some more security features. And part of that involved the current courtroom. Initially we envisioned the current courtroom as the current courtroom and wouldn't need any alterations. But as we look at it and as we place those two courtrooms end to end, in a lot of discussions, especially with the sheriff's department, it became evident that having a central lobby area for those two courtrooms has a lot of advantages as far as security for people coming in for a jury trial, or if you need to have metal detection or whatever prior to going into a court. There's a lot of advantages of having a central location for that activity for both courtrooms. It also allows a better separation of court security staff and jail staff. There's a line, for the jail stuff, and so it makes it a cleaner handoff of the traffic flowing back and forth under that kind of scenario. So we've got a packet of information that kind of predated that idea that came about yesterday. And we really fleshed out, why those things are good ideas. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we've also got some other things that are still on the table as far as some of the design things. But we talked a lot about that in Public Works last evening. We've also got it on the agenda for the following meeting in admin. The purpose of the meeting, we're stopping here in finance, is to discuss the financing project, which is what Mike will discuss with the detailed information on our debt schedules and whatnot. But and maybe we want to start out with that, but then we can dig into the details on what the building looks like currently, what our thoughts are, and what thoughts we still need to have in order to reach a final conclusion. But in order to get there, what's on the table for us today is the resolution to issue debt to finance the project. As you recall, in the budget discussions that we had, we did itemize within the budget, that this project is forthcoming and that we would pay for this project through the use of debt. And so that was approved within the budget. So now we're at the stage of what we need is an initial resolution. It's called an initial resolution, which then states that, yes, the county does intend to issue debt for this project, which then allows us to start the serious planning of all the details and the plans and the bidding of construction. And we've got a method of paying for that before those other activities happen. So this is the next step in the process. And we'll kind of walk through what that means to our debt program, and then we can talk a little bit more about the actual physical design and details of the building that we're talking about. So Mike, why don't you start out with that?
All right. So we're looking at the levy plan that Brian, our municipal advisor, put together last fall for us. We have since updated the numbers in this plan to reflect what the 2021 levy numbers actually are. I know this is kind of a daunting thing to look at, so if it's okay, I'd like to just kind of stand up and point out the different sections, break this down a little bit. It really is, yeah, it is simpler than what it looks like.
Sure.
So
why don't you do it on this screen, Mike? The cameras look at direction.
So, Mike, can you center it here, pull these in? All right, so this top middle section is just identifying by year which projects we're looking at for doing borrowings into the future. It includes, the budget borrowings that we were talking about doing each year now. It includes this project that we're talking about. So these are the projects with the estimated dollar amounts by year that we anticipate having financial needs for. This is the borrowing we just did. Okay, so you shift, Mike. There you go. So this section right here is just the operating levy. So 2018 through 2021 are actual numbers because those budgets have been set. So here's the total operating levy, and then we're projecting forward based on levy limits that we know of. We're estimating about 0.7% operating levy growth each year. So we get an idea where our operating levies are going. If you shift this way a little bit, the green is the operating levy. The blue section now, we're looking at debt levy for the next 15, 20 years or far out. It shows by these different projects across here, these are different borrowings, it shows the principal and interest payments each year. And then as we keep coming across, shift.
Okay.
A little more, can we go?
Let me, it comes off the screen,
Right,
unfortunately.
so this gray section is the total levy section. We're combining the operating levy with the debt levy, come up with the total levy. So first column in the gray section, total levy by year. This is where we're kind of getting into the planning part of this. the second column shows the percentage increase of the levy by year. The third column shows what the equalized value by year, and obviously we're assuming going into the future, we're just assuming a 1% growth on that. And then the final column, which isn't on here, but in your handout, you can see what the estimated tax rate will be by year. Now, the plan was set up last fall, knowing that we had budget concerns. We developed this plan for meeting our budget concerns going into the future and including this courtroom addition project that we're doing. So looking at the total levy, year over year debt levy change, you see from 2022 to 5 years worth of total levy, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, counting this year, there's 4 years we were looking at 5% increase in levy. But then beyond that, bringing the levy increases back down 1.2 and then getting into that 0.6% increase range. That's kind of the plan that was developed. That's kind of the range we're trying to stay in. I mean, there's, you know, we don't know this project, assuming it goes forward. You know, we don't know what the overall cost is going to be and what the borrowing may or may not need to be. But whatever it is, it will still fit, and we'll develop the plan in some way that we still follow that levy percent increase from year to year. For example, the plan right now, this is just arbitrary, but we were going to borrow $2 million this year and $5 million next year for the courtroom project. We may still do that. We may not. We may borrow it all up front. That's yet to be determined. But whatever we do, the payments will be structured that we still stay within the plan. So all of this detail, can you scroll down, Mike? Up. And shift over. So this chart just shows, based on the plan, what we're doing with the levy out through 2026. And the plan, what we're trying to accomplish overall, is we're trying to, at some point, get this levy where it tapers off, or maybe eventually it'll start coming down again. That's kind of what our plan is. And then the graph over here just shows the percentage change of the levy by year. So this is where we're at in 2021 budget. We had a 5.6% increase. We're going to hold in that area for maybe 3 more budget cycles, and then we anticipate seeing that levy increase going down again. So, questions on that? Is that?
Well, the levy increase then 2025 drops off because we were paying off our jail debt. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. As we pay off our debt, the levy needs increased.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Sherman.
Like the borrowing for the second largest courtroom in 2022, we got listed at $5 million, but Mr. Kane brought us something that's going to be over that, a little over that. And then we take the sheriff's plan from near courtroom to that central lobby, that's going to be a little more too, correct? So are you taking that into consideration?
Well, we can talk about that because the numbers have changed a little bit, and we'll talk about why.
Okay.
But do you have any questions about kind of the structure and the plan? Generally stays the same. The number's going to change a little bit, but the concept is outlined here, and then we'll get into specifics.
The concept stays the same.
I really like this.
And we're
Do it. We're going to level and then actually go down.
Right.
and it'll be structured. We know that it might come in a little higher than we initially anticipated. We'll structure the debt to try to stay within.
The operating levy, have you looked at the projections 22 to 26?
I have not looked down since what we did last fall.
Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about in March, is to refine those numbers a bit. Okay. All right. We took us well, last year was the first time this county ever had a long-term financial plan. I think you guys did a good job. One sheet of paper has no indication the amount of work behind it.
So like I said, we're hoping we can get Brian on board for the county board meeting. He did a lot better job than I did to explain this.
Okay,
And that's Brian Della, our financial advisor from PMA.
he will be here.
Probably virtually.
Okay, it's for the February meeting. Okay, all right. Okay,
So conceptually, that's how things work. So where are we at, with the actual project? Public Works was presented with a new plan, and we'll put that right now. Sure, yeah, thank you. John Kane, the architect, is with us as well today, and he'll be handing out that showing at Public Works last night. But basically, what we're talking about, the numbers since we talked last, and we've been at this, for 2-3 years now, and the numbers, have changed a little bit. But we're in that range for construction, the 7 to 7.5 million. And we've also got the $400,000 commitment for the street construction. So what is currently in the plan is going to total about $8 million. And there's reasons for that, and there's things that you need to discuss yet in order to refine, exactly what that amount is going to be. But as we sit here today, if you look at the resolution for issuing bonds and an amount not to exceed, if you ask me what that number is, I would tell you $8 million as we sit today. Further discussion that we will have includes exactly what is included in this project. We've talked to all the staff, including like the Veterans Association. There are Gary Elliott's services that he provides to veterans is in a building across the street. Tim Hagberg has consistently said, that building has got maintenance issues and this and that. And so one of the thoughts is, well, if we raise that building, move veteran services into this building, create more of a parking area, that would be something that may be conceivable and achievable within this plan. So, in the numbers are about $600,000 for additional construction for that services, which I don't think necessarily we would need to build them anything special if we could fit them into the building. Or we wouldn't have to do anything with that services. We could leave them where they are. But, as we talk about construction and options, I put that on the table and include it in the plan just to give you thoughts of, why didn't we think of that? Well, we thought of it, it's in there. If we want to do it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. Initially, when we were trying to build the courtroom attached to this building in various locations, we also talked about the staff in this wing, the clerk of courts, district attorney, victim witness, criminal justice people, and what that hallway looks like. And we've always had traffic out in this hall when we've had meetings here. And what can we do to clean some of that up? So in our discussions with those staff, there's recommendations in there for remodeling of this wing to make it more efficient for the staffing that's there currently and into the future. As you recall, since we started this discussion, we've been allocated an additional assistant district attorney, which wasn't in the original plan because that's something that came about last year. But we did accommodate space for that assistant district attorney by slicing into the child support area. So they had a bigger kind of room area, and in years past we eliminated one staff person there, so we had some extra room. We moved the wall from where it was, moved it over to create an office for the assistant district attorney. We also allocated 0.6 FTE in the clerk of court's office last year to bring a person up to full time, which then should suffice for them, clerk of courts staff wise, but then accommodating the workflow in there may require some additional remodeling of that area. So there's some things that have been kind of fluid since the last time that we talked. But there's changes to this wing that are contemplated within this plan as well. One area that needs further discussion, of course, is the this room and what its function is, and the courtroom where you hold your county board meetings. Is that the way you want to continue into the future? Having set up and tear down that equipment within the courtroom, or is there a way or a need to maybe build a bigger assembly room within this project to accommodate county board functions? There are times where there's committee meetings in this room that doesn't have the capacity to hold the amount of people that are there for a particular meeting. So it might be a way to address that if that's your prerogative. Speaking of the criminal justice system, we've got Justice Point now, to help us create those pretrial diversion programs. So we did talk to the Justice Point staff just to kind of talk about, okay, what do those programs look like? What kind of space do you need for those? They're meeting with individuals either individually or in small groups. They do some type of drug testing. Where should that be done? And so part of the plan included, currently there's 2 individuals in the office I used to occupy next to the assembly room. The thought is to create this space into usable diversion programming space so that each of those individuals have offices. There's space for drug testing or small group meetings. But then that displaces this assembly room, which then leads into the discussion, I think we do need another meeting room, and if it does get created, I think it should be larger than this, and then you get into, if you want it large enough for your court or your meetings and whatnot. So, those are some of the things that, you can still talk about and decide on what direction you want those to go as we start finalizing this plan to fit in within the budget. We also talked about, trying not to cut corners. When we built the jail several years ago, there were things done to save money up front that keep biting us year after year as far as maintenance issues, locks breaking or different things that, that cost us more money in the long run. And that's why I'm really happy that we had this conversation with the Sheriff's Department yesterday. They really put a lot of thought into workflow and eliminating the need for extra court security staff. If you've got a lobby here and a lobby here in 2 different locations, it makes it harder to deal with any emergency in either court. Having that central location really does a lot of good things, that being one of them. So, a few things left to talk about as far as the actual details of the design. And so, in our discussions in Public Works last night, we talked about some of those concepts. You're going to be the experts here on how that works and into the plan. In admin, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But then as you get together as a group of 15 individuals, to work through some of those concepts of what you want in the final plan, that's going to be an important piece of where we end up with a number. So again, I think there's room within the budget as it's presented to do some of these different things. As I mentioned, if there is this concept of the central thing or the central lobby area for both courts, that means we have to flip the current courtroom around so that the entrance is the other way. And that will take some costs that we don't have a number for yet. But that's where we kind of give and take on some of the things that are in there to make it fit within what you want to do. So again, where we're at is around 8 million, depending on how some of these things flush out. So we'll certainly entertain your questions and answer questions. John Payne probably has some other words of wisdom.
You've said everything. You said it well.
Mr. Kinsley, did you have a comment?
Yes. Mr. King did a really nice job of presenting last evening. Just to be commended for the work he's already done. One of the board members last night also brought up the idea of having a clinic put into the building. I thought that was that supervisor thought that was a very good idea, so. I know Mr. Kane doesn't want to continue to make more and more plans, but it's good to have an open mind to try to look at what we can accommodate and do the best we can do.
Yes, Mr. Schuman.
Mr. Kane, does 2A and 2B, or which option includes the veteran service?
Neither.
Neither.
No, the veteran service concept came up well after all these drawings were done. And so it's what I would call a moving target at the moment. I did talk to Gary.
Yeah.
Yes. And toured his building. He's got quite a bit of space there. Couple offices, he's got a meeting room. There is some storage in the basement. Where he should go, I think needs to be studied. To be perfectly honest, I think we need to drill down a little more deeply into what he really needs for space. I think he may have moved into a building that exists, and he's been able to kind of, as any of us would have, kind of commandeered the whole building. No disrespect to him. I mean, it's a major program that is very, very essential to your community. But to answer your question, there's money in the budget that we're talking about that's in this booklet, but there's not a physical solution to meeting that need.
And that is a completely separate building, right, Tom, with maintenance, operations?
Right, we're maintaining that building for that one function, it's an older building that has had some issues, so that was the only driver in bringing that into this discussion is that an opportunity to do something different with that building?
Well, and then security. Remember that?
Right, and the clientele that Gary helps, currently they're in their own area, own space. He has some concerns about bringing that into the building, where it's located, that sort of thing. So those are some of the discussion points that we've got on that topic.
So any questions or comments? So the task before us is to look at and approve the debt limit, the debt resolution not to exceed 8 million.
Yeah, so we've had, these informative discussions in the committee to prepare you for, that next step. And as I said, this initial resolution authorizes us to issue debt. And, if say it's $8 million is the number that we put on there, that doesn't mean we're automatically going out and issuing debt for $8 million. We're still, that allows us to start the process of detailing the plans, going through things again, getting the bid documents together for construction, all those things that we start spending some money on. It allows us to capture those costs and issue debt to pay for those over the life of the project or the building. So, the step that we're at and the step that we want accomplished at county board is, authorizing that issuance so that we can proceed with the project.
Right. Okay. I mean, philosophically, I think we probably underspent on the jail, and we should, not underspend on this project. But then again, we should have a cap, because if we keep raising the bar, it's going to be a $16 million project, and so I think 8 million, we cap it at 8 million, then we have to live within 8 million.
And then, the step after that, when we hire a construction manager, and maybe John can help explain how a construction manager at risk concept works and how that caps the cost, on the construction side. Can you help on that, John?
I think that's helpful. We are talking about the county retaining what's called a construction manager at risk. It's somewhat similar to what you did when the jail was built, when Margaret Johnson was that construction manager. And not to endorse Margaret and Johnson, but they're extremely interested in this project. They were hoping, honestly, that they could be hired without interview, but I think the plan through your attorney is that you need to go through the RFP process. And so there are 3 or 4 other well-qualified equally qualified companies that you would submit, you would give to them that opportunity as well. So the construction manager works in parallel with us as the architects. They're under separate contract. They are your representative at the table. They bring all of the budget and schedule knowledge to the project that honestly, historically, architects tended to do, but the architectural community allowed construction managers to kind of carve their way into this business. And so that's fine. We work really well with all the people that I could imagine would go after this. So they're your budgeting schedule people. So they would establish the schedule at the beginning that we would all work towards, both the design as well as the construction schedule. At periodic places during the course of the design work, they would give to you a updated construction budget based on our drawings and the work that we've done. That's probably three estimates that you will get from them. In our work, it's divided into three. Before construction, it's divided into really two phases. There's the schematic design, preliminary design. It takes what you have here as diagrams and actually becomes a floor plan. You start to see what the building's going to look like. That's schematic design. Design development is where we bring our engineers in and start to put the details to the end. And then there's construction documents. So I think there are three phases in that. The CM will give us an estimate of schematic design completion, design development completion, and then construction documents prior to going out to bid. Now, either at the completion of schematic design or design development, they will give to you a guaranteed maximum price for the project, and they're committing that that's going to be the number. Typically, it's at the design development phase. There are two different kinds of construction management types, if you will. There's a CM agent, and there's a CM at risk. The CM agent is strictly there to manage the budget and schedule. They do not self-perform any of the work. They're not a contractor, per se, in that pure sense of the word. CM at risk, and you have the liberty to decide which way you want to go. CM at risk, which is honestly what most construction managers want to do because they want to be doing some of the construction as well. That's where they make money. So you can't argue with that. What they will do at bid time, they will break the project down into packages. So it's not a single prime, but it's multiple primes. And that allows then for them to, by issuing these packages, can get your local contractors involved in the project. And that you really want to be able to do that. So they will package these. They'll be concrete, masonry, steel, blah, blah, blah. As an at-risk CM, is this too much detail? As an at-risk CM, they will likewise want to bid on the work. So depending upon who that CM is, they have their own tradespeople because they're doing construction all the time. What I want to be sure, and we want to be sure, and I think you will have good construction managers bidding on this work. You don't want to find the time, and I've seen this in other places, where the construction manager issues this package and nobody bids on it. Okay, you know this is going, and so the CM says, oh, I've got shucks, and I guess I'll have to do it. And there's no competition. So you want to work really hard with the construction manager and hold their feet to the fire politely to make sure that they're getting bids for all of the packages. Most projects, and this is a large project, do involve a construction manager. So where you're going out of the world of constructionness, if you will, the path you're taking is a very familiar one. So I applaud your efforts at deciding and thinking seriously about engaging a construction manager on the project. And as I said, we work with many of them. We've done work with Mark and Johnson. You'll find a company called Myron out of the Appleton area, Appleton Valley, Nina will be involved, will be interested. There's the Samuels Group, there's another, I mean, there are Kraus Anderson from the cities. These are all companies that are going to want to be interested in bidding on it. We can certainly help as that time comes. Give you contact information so that you can send them. Have I said too much? Or
No, that's fine. Mr. Schuman had a question. Comment.
Thank you. Mr. Kane, how confident are you that we cap this at 8 million? Does 8 million get us the CM agent?
yes, it's included.
Does 8 million get us the veteran service officers who may want to?
There's a number in my construction budget for that. Yes.
And then,
Is there an assembly room, county board room?
yeah, I want to go there, but
You don't want to go there?
no, I do want to go there. Because I feel, I know the need for the second courtroom. I do. I'm not arguing that. But there's going to be times when both courtrooms are not in use. And if we could multi-purpose one or both of those for meeting rooms, that's where I'd like to go, or at least look at it. I mean, because I think if we have a meeting room and 2 large courtrooms, wow, 2 or 3 of those could be empty.
Well, I do think, if I can be so direct, I do think you have to replace this room.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
It's to me, in my mind, it's a no-brainer that you have to have an assembly room in this project. And historically, if we were here 2 summers ago, those concepts that we played around with all over the campus, including the one that was over here, we did have an assembly room in that plan. It's my fault, I think, that when we developed these drawings last summer, we didn't put that assembly room into the drawing. So now all of a sudden it's a conversation that we probably had 2 years ago, but because of my fault, we didn't. It isn't done to go.
So then, does 8 million get us?
I think it does.
Pretty confident.
Well, I'm looking at I'm looking at the Martin Johnson numbers, and I'm looking at the soft costs that we've set aside. I mean, to Tom's point, if you bond for the money, you don't have to spend it. And it can't possibly become a $16 million project, but you see what happens. If you provided a little more cushion, just to be confident in that regard, I'm not suggesting that you do that. I think we need to try to stay within the 8 million. I do think that the veteran services topic is, in my mind, gray, because we don't have a solution for that. I simply took the square footage of the building and multiplied it times the construction value that Mark and Johnson gave to us for new construction, and that's how I came up with $613,000 for that. But there's no understanding as to what that represents. Let me think out loud a little bit. I think as you explore the idea of replacing that building into something else, I would not lose sight of maybe the possibility that there could be a building already built here in the community and the county that maybe you would purchase instead of building. This would be the time that you would want to explore any idea and option that you have.
Right. So, Tom, don't we own that building down on 63 where they?
Yes,
Okay, so half of it's vacant, correct? Or leased out?
leased out, yeah.
So, I mean, we do own another building, at least within the area. In your experience, how much time and effort within the county staff is this going to take? If we go with the contractor at risk or whatever approach?
Well, in fact, the construction manager, and I would agree
Right.
with them, that eliminates a lot of that time that Tim might have to play or Tom would play on the project, because they are really managing the project on your behalf.
Yeah.
So I think it's, in that respect, it's a service that you would well appreciate.
to that point too, Tim Hagbert did a great job kind of handling through the ambulance garage construction.
Sure, he did.
But he's got other duties as well in a project of this scope. We would need that construction manager to handle those activities.
Right, but with the manager at risk, we would not have, we'd have minimal staff time, not minimal.
You have to hold them responsible. for
Right.
this.
And then we would have to,
As you have to hold the architect responsible.
right. Feet to the fire, I heard somewhere.
Speak to the fire, yeah.
I really appreciate it. What do we pay the construction manager?
They've given me numbers between 3% and 4% of the construction value. In my budget, I gave them 3.5%.
So, right, okay. So, any more questions before we move to the draft resolution to borrow not to exceed? And I guess the number you're suggesting, Mr. Hoff, is 8 million?
Yes. And then Mr. King, after discussions yesterday, we don't have a number for flipping the current courtroom around, but he could come up with an estimate by county board next week.
Right.
Just to have an estimate of a number on what that would mean.
Do you want me to put a number on the assembly room too?
Yeah, and why don't you explain the concept we just briefly talked about as far as the alternative?
Oh, yeah. One of the things that we can do in the bidding process, and we typically do this on most projects anyway, just so that we're comfortable that we're going to stay within the budget. And the state of Wisconsin is pretty adamant about this particular item. We talk about what's called additive alternate, and that we could take the assembly/county boardroom, if we call it that, or maybe it's just an assembly room, and we identify on the final construction documents that it is to be bid separately, or rather, in the bidding process, you would get a separate number for that. It would be done as part of the project, but at bid day, you could then determine that you had the money, and maybe the bidding climate was incredibly good at that point in time, and that you could then accept that alternate. But it just gives you some flexibility as you go through the bidding process. So you don't have to go back to the board for more money, or you don't have to get into some difficult negotiation with the contractor that we're going to have to take something out of the project, you get 50 cents on the dollar, all that hullabaloo that happens. Quote me on that to the fire. I'm being pretty honest with you in this conversation. So John's talking too much. It's an ad alternate, and that we could do that with that.
Right. So Mike, if we went, I think I heard you say, or maybe I'm making a hopeful assumption, if we had an $8 million debt, you're saying we still could stay within the 5%?
I think we haven't had that particular discussion with Brian, the 7 million to 8 million, but I think it could, and we can confirm that today, that I believe it can stay within this.
It may add another year of an increase. I think it's going to be a trade-off. Do you want a higher tax rate, or do you want to extend that out a little bit more? I mean, if you're borrowing 8 million instead of 7 million, it's going to should be in there somewhere.
Yeah, it's gonna, you're gonna maybe.
I think it can stay within 5%, but it will extend it probably.
Well, yeah, I mean, the tax rate that once the jail debt is paid off may not go down as much.
Right.
Okay, all right. So are you recommending then that we pass this resolution at 8 million?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, is there any thought of a cushion?
What?
A cushion that Mr. King was
A
talking about?
cushion. My personal experience is if you put a cushion in, you spend it.
I agree.
So, I mean, I just would like to.
I just throw that out there.
Right, I want to cap it, close the checkbook, and that's it, and that's my philosophy.
And we're not gonna build it, then look back and say, and they pay.
Well, I think you're gonna do that every time. You can't foresee the future.
Maybe I can do this, not to complicate the conversation, but that if by the date of the county board meeting, I had a better understanding of the budget because there are a couple blanks that I need to fill in. I could share that, I could give that information to you, Tom, and then have better confidence that the 8 million is appropriate. Is that?
Yeah,
And so then maybe you amend the resolution at the board meeting? I'm not trying to.
Yeah, and the number could change at the board meeting. I mean, obviously, they can do what they want at the board to adopt it at resolution. Just a couple other thoughts. We talked about, this concept of the central lobby and security area, and I think that's an excellent way to do it. And I think we should proceed on that, even though that's going to cost a little bit more money. In my opinion, that's the way to go. But you could have other give and takes, like the Veterans Service Building. We could just leave that building there and continue life on. So that's an alternative. The remodeling of this wing. Somehow we have to accommodate, the pre-trial conversion programs, but we don't even know what they look like.
Right.
As we're developing those, we're going for the TAD grant, which comes around every 5 years, and that's where we're going to get more money if we get that grant to develop those programs. But we've asked the Justice Point staff, in their experience, what are we looking at and how much space does that need? So, I mean, there are some trade-offs, and it's going to be, what is your higher priority? It's like, you know what, we need a bigger assembly room / boardroom. That's what we have to have instead of doing anything with the veteran service or this wing. So, I mean, there are some trade-offs you can do to keep that under 8 million. But I think anything we do, like the courtroom flipping around, it's like, let's do it right. And if we don't have enough money to do everything, the stuff that we do should be done correctly.
It sounds like the courtroom with the central lobby will save us ultimately staff time.
Yes, that's the plan, yes.
Okay. So what's the pleasure of the committee? Do we want to discuss the resolution? We should. Or would there somebody make a motion to pass the resolution capped at 8 million, pass it on to the county board for their consideration and deciding?
Well, I would certainly be in favor of presenting this next week.
Right. We've got to do something. We've got to get going here. So
I'll make a motion.
Okay, a motion's been made. You're capping at 8 million then? Okay, and the not to exceed 8 million. To pass the, I guess, the resolution to issue debt not to exceed 8 million. Is there a second to that motion? Dawn?
Yep.
Okay. All right, I mean, can a chairman second? Okay, then I will second the motion. Okay, any more discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. 2.
No,
Okay, Mr. Kinsley, it's up to you, I guess.
I'm in favor of the motion again from the county board.
Okay, so, all right, the motion's been made and seconded and passed to send this resolution onto the county board for discussion. Okay. Anything else, Mike or Tom? I do have an editorial comment. Okay, we do the tax rates by county and we base it on assessed value. And I think that's huge because I think we have such a high assessed value with all our second homes, that drives our tax rate per assessed value way down. I think there might be a better way to look at it in terms of fairness. I'll have to go back and look at it, but we're the 4th highest assessed value county in the state. You've got, I think, Vilas County, Door County, and I can't remember the 3rd So, anyway, that's an editorial. Do you want to talk about the treasurer's supplemental information? Anything? Is Diane on? Diane, do you have anything to say? Okay. All right. Anything else that we want to talk about? Yes,
Just a comment, on the tax rate. I think that's why when you look at the plan is more developed on, here's the 5% stay within for 3 or 4 years and then go back.
right.
That's more what the focus.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Right, not tax willy-nilly. Okay, if there's no more discussion and nothing else for the good of the cause, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Kane.
Good job.
Thank you.
That is